I'm here to talk about what we in business would need to be part of, as that wonderful phrase, decarbonising the economy is all about. We have an incredible belief in PepsiCo UK in supporting the group because we've set up ourselves some very high environmental standards, or at least we believe so. We constantly get challenged by people like myself, but I think it's absolutely essential for our long-term prosperity and growth that we actually achieve those goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what I believe is the necessity in terms of policy frameworks to do that. So excuse me for practicality. Sorry. It is the long term I want to talk about tonight because this is not a short-term thing. And long-term thinking, and that I mean by that beyond 2011, or I think as we talked in the pre-session, perhaps even beyond the middle of next week, is in short supply at the moment, very short supply. And on the eve of that election, with severe economic challenges to navigate through, you can forgive those policymakers for focusing on the here and now rather than the long term. But as we heard from our previous speaker, if we don't do that, we're going to be in a very difficult place. And certainly from a business point of view, I probably won't have a business to run in 25 years' time. Short-term political and economic issues are important to today, but they are incredibly trivial in the context of that big change coming. And if you think about the predictions of the future, they are pretty worrying. We've all heard the figures, and I'll give no apology for repeating them because they are quite huge in scale. When you think about a population on the Earth of 8 billion by 2030, food consumption going up by 50%, energy by 45%, unless we do make some fundamental changes in the way we operate, we're going to have a cataclysmic challenge in delivering against that. And as Chief Executive of a food company, I'll repeat that, I'm the Chief Executive of a food company. Most of you, when you think about PepsiCo, don't think of it as a food company. But that's essentially what we are. Walker's Crisps, for those of you who don't know, Tropicana juice, oranges, potatoes, sugar for Pepsi. That's essentially what we are. And you can imagine if we don't address the climate change issues, how tremendous the change will be for our business. So we absolutely need a credible and reliable supply of agricultural produce for this business. And you know, when you think about unpredictable weather patterns, it's very easy to be glib and look very far in the future and think they're not real. But every time I see a crop failure around the world, it actually does impact our business somewhere around the world. It increases waste levels, and that hits our bottom line, that increases prices, and we all know the consequences of that. So we talk about this as all long-term and happening somewhere else. And yet, in 2007, we had floods in the UK, our potato crop, the very essence of what Walker's Crisps depends on, was ruined, and it very quickly brings home that the long term may not be very far away indeed. So we need to plan ahead if we want business to be able to stay in business for more than just the next decade. And we absolutely need to mitigate the challenge and the changing environment conditions. So what do? At PepsiCo, we've actually set ourselves some fairly challenging goals. And I'm going to do a bit of a party political broadcast for a minute on what we've been doing. And then I'll come back to, well, that's not enough and we want to do more, and talk a little bit about how we as a group could get together and influence policy to create an environment that would allow us to do more. Over the next 10 years, we've said we're going to make our business fossil fuel free. I think it's easy to say defossilise our business would probably be easier. And unplug our largest factories from the mains water supply. When you say, well, why only the largest factories? Well, they're the ones that have potatoes, and potatoes have water, and I won't bore you with the details, but those are the ones that use the water and we can get the most out of that. We've also said we're going to send nothing to landfill across our entire supply chain, and for our product packaging to only be either recyclable, biodegradable, or renewable. Now, we've made some good progress. During 2008, when we set those goals, we almost halved the landfill. We doubled the use of renewable electricity to more than 16%. But we're absolutely not fooling ourselves. We know we've taken on a huge task to even deliver the goals that we've set out here. And meeting it is going to require an awful lot of investment, ingenuity, because I can't tell you today how we're going to do some of that stuff. And we've got to have the courage to hold firm in the face of a lot of short-term challenges, especially to a business that still has to deliver to a Wall Street investor community quarter by quarter, month by month. But I would argue that some of our commitments have already been tested. We began this path to zero just as the economy imploded. We were sitting there as our competitors knuckled down, protected their bottom line month by month, quarter by quarter. Now, I'm not trying to pretend that we did any different. But one very big difference to us is we kept on doing the planning for the longer term. We didn't cut any of our environmental investment, none of our capital commitment to that space, and we ended up having very strong meetings setting strategy for a sustainable future by 2030 across the business, and particularly in the UK. Now, as we've come through that most tremendous economic turmoil, I think our timing couldn't have actually been better. The limitations of that short-term thinking were put in the spotlight for all of us to see during the economic crisis. And the watchword of regulators and policymakers suddenly became sustainability. We started also to look beyond PepsiCo, because our carbon footprint isn't about just what we do, what comes in the door and what we ship out. It's very much about working with our suppliers, working with agriculture, and putting the weight of our energy behind public policies that can set a framework to encourage a low-carbon economy. But it does strike me as we gather pace along this path that the scale of the ambition that we have for the UK business is beginning to outstrip the policy framework which we currently operate. We've got a strong ethical compass. We know what is the right thing to do. And that does guide us to build against our commitment to build sustainable working practices. But we've also got an undeniable business case. We are a business, and it's in the direct interest to invest in mitigating the risks we face. So what a wonderful situation. We've got the interests of business, the interests of government, and the interests of NGO in one place, coinciding. The government could quite easily harness the resources and influence companies like mine to help them achieve our environmental goals, our goals. They can't let an opportunity like this go to waste. But this is exactly what will happen unless the policy framework works within, I'll say that again, works within the instinct of business. Businesses are poised to invest. They want to do this. They want to invest in sustainability. But as every business person will tell you, I need two things to be able to make those investments. I need relative certainty, and perhaps even more important, I need practical policy frameworks. We would, I think, have trouble in describing the current environment tax framework with its plethora of CCAs, CLAs, CRCs, ETS, FITs. I mean, I could go on. It's hardly practical, and some, I dare say, would say hardly comprehensible either. And while that may be easy for large businesses to put resources against that to understand and apply that policy, think of small and medium-sized enterprises. They have not a hope to be able to work through that. We've got to find a better solution. And if people in this room can't put that together, then I'd argue we'll really struggle. Now, certainty will come with a floor price on carbon, enabling businesses like mine to plan ahead, to figure out where it is that we can get the best return for the investments that we make. And it's wonderful that today's Aldersgate report, backed by business from many sectors, NGOs and professional bodies, proposes just such a floor price mechanism. But alongside this, we also need a tax system which encourages green behaviours. Much time and effort is currently going into designing ways of properly penalising profits businesses make. But just think how different the UK economy would be, and the UK government's emission targets would look if tax penalised environmental damage. We are in urgent need of a green tax switch. We all know the words of Al Gore. Why wouldn't we tax what we burn, not what we earn? How do we create a policy framework that would deliver against that? If we have a financial stick, how about a financial carrot for business? Many businesses are absolutely convinced of the case for transitioning to a low-carbon economy, but are thwarted by the lack of funds needed to kickstart the process. Incentives for investment in green technologies could be an incredibly powerful tool. They will be critical if UK businesses to make those necessary changes and I do underline the and, be able to remain competitive in a global economy. Without that, they will not be able to do it without a tremendous consequence and very short-term and immediate consequence. So a green tax switch with incentives for new technologies and a floor price on carbon would really set the UK apart, a leader on the world stage in creating a green economy. It would attract the kind of business investment generate green jobs, and allow companies like mine to meet the full extent of our environmental ambitions. We're ready to put our weight and our resources behind this, behind such a great endeavour. All we need is for the next government to meet us halfway.